Good day, everyone. My name is John Megling, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Azure Calculator. So the next step in this process is for us to take those estimation results and get our assessment results and go into the Azure Calculator and actually, map that to what we think it's going to look like from an estimated cost in Azure. And just search for Azure Calculator in your favorite search tool. We're going to start by hitting the Virtual Machine tab. Again, there's many things on here. We're just mainly going to cover, again, what we're using for this solution, and we're going to need to hit the virtual machines piece. We'll see a pop up there and we'll hit view, and then we're going to start actually taking a look at where our virtual machine is. You can see I picked UK West, but we'll eventually change that back to the East because that's where I'm putting it. So it's important to get that right because costs do vary based on where it's located. So we're going to go ahead and start with this very first machine, this application database that we have in our company. I'm going to grab that name. It's a nice thing to do when you're creating the quote to go ahead and grab the server names because it makes it much more logical about what you want to what you're creating and what it's for. I like to do it that way. The way you pick out your own way of doing it in naming conventions, but I want to take a look at the sizing so I can make sure which machine type I want. We can see it's a B2MS, so we can go to our machine type and go find that B2MS. We can see it's 2 cores, 8 gig of RAM, and the hard drive piece. This is a database, so we have some options here: standard HDD and premium. For SQL Server, we would like to use more. In most cases, this is a small database. We get away with either, but we'll do an example of a premium SSD drive. All this is going to affect the cost to a certain amount based on what you choose. I'm going to have 2 of those for this database. Actually, this is the OS disk. I'm going to have 1 OS disk. I'm going to make that 128 gig. By default, when you create a virtual machine in Azure, it's going to create a 128 gig drive. So I like to start there. Some people like their drive to be bigger. That's fine. We can look at the current utilization tab and where I copied those drives in there. That way I can start taking a look and mapping out what my drives. You can see we've got 3 basically 99 gig drives and 199 gig drive. One of those 99 gig drives is our actual operating system disk, and then we're going to do these data disks. Go ahead and switch that to the correct location. Sorry to be jumping all around. We'll hit the storage tab because we want to add those extra data disks that we have. And then we have lots of disk choices, but for virtual machines, we're going to be page blobs or managed disk. Managed disk are the new disk in Azure, and that's the way we're going to go for this example. And we're going to stick with the premium because it's a SQL database. And you may see bouncing back and forth just to get this right, and you're going to want to do the same thing. We can see it's 99. We don't have 99, so we have to go to the next biggest page. We have 2 of those disks because remember, we've already done our OS disk as part of that other piece. So we're going to change that to 2. And we want to give it a name that associates to the server we're creating these disks for. And just review the screen, make any changes that you feel is necessary. I'm going to go ahead and label that a little more so I know which disk is which. And then we're going to pop back and we can see we have this almost 200 gig drive that we're going to need to create too as part of our estimate. We're going to hit the storage tab again, go ahead and bop down and do a similar thing for that roughly 200 gig drive. We're going to give it a name. And this naming will make sense when we get to the end and you see the exported Excel sheet product that makes our estimate, and it makes all this a little clearer in the end. Remember the storage types, we're using managed disk. And again, premium because we're using a database. We need 200 gigs, so we got to go to 256. And we're going to need one of those. So we've got that machine completed. We can go back over and take a look at one of our other machines. We've got these domain controllers, our RDS server. So let's take a look at that one and go ahead and do that, our remote desktop services server. We'll grab the name. I'll show one more of these and not going to do the rest until we get to the end. You'll see them, but just so you can see some of this, I don't want to be too redundant and take up your time, but we'll go ahead and toss the name in there. And just like before, we're going to pick our region. We support Windows and Linux, obviously, so this is a Windows workload. And at this point, I'm remembering that we needed this first server to be a database. So we're going to need to put SQL on this. We're going to change it from Windows OS only, and we're going to pick SQL Server. That way, when we create our machine, it's going to have SQL on it. We get billed for the SQL. I'm going to need Standard Edition for this deployment. So go ahead and make that change. Sorry about that. I should have done that in the original part, but I think you get the point there. Just reviewing that to make sure that's right. So now that we've got our name, our Windows OS only piece, we need to come over and see what our sizing results look like. We go back to our sizing results, and we can see it's a B1 MS. And in this example, I'm going to show you that, but we're going to switch it to a D machine. It's an RDS server. And we talked about that a little earlier about the difference between Ds and Bs. And I would suggest you review the series and again make what choice is comfortable for you. But we like to move to the production kind of series, which would be the D series. So I'm going to go ahead and move this into that series, make that choice, and we'll see, a comparable number of cores in memory. Lots of different choices for series of machines, and there's lots of different choices there you can make. I'm going to pick a typical D2. And then we've got to do our OS disk. And notice we're limited there based on the machine we chose. Some machines support certain types of disk and other machines support different types of disks. That's something you may run into. But a standard hard drive will work just fine for this RDS server. And remember what I said, we're going to need to do a minimum 128 gig drive. Show you that, what we're picking there again. And notice the transaction units, if we go that route, there could be some transaction unit cost. They're not significant, and a lot of times we just take the defaults on those unless it's application specific and we know it's going to be different. And we're checking out the hard drives just to make sure we've got enough drives. You can see our RDS server just has a single 100 gig drive, so that drive that we picked is going to be just fine. The next thing we're going to want to look at is on the networking side. We're going to need for this domain controller environment we're putting in Azure a communication channel or a VPN gateway between our on-premise site and Azure. So we're going to go ahead and add that VPN gateway, so we include that in our estimate. Make sure our region's correct. We have two different types: express route and VPN gateways. Express route's dedicated with the vendors. Uh, we're gonna pick the typical what small medium customer would use, which is more of like a VPN gateway over the internet. We're going to give it the number of hours. 730 is the standard in Azure for how many hours it's on all the time. And we're going to pick VPN. And then on our bandwidth side, we're going to say we estimate about 500 outbound. So remember, we're going to get charged for outbound, not for inbound transfers, as you notice in the note there. And if you want to rename it, you can definitely rename it. VPN gateway is usually okay. If you're going to have multiples, you might want to, change the name to VPN gateway 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing. In this case, I'm going to label it for what we're using it for, which is our VPN site-to-site gateway. It looks pretty good, and we're good for that piece of it. And then what we need to do next is go ahead and export that out. We can save it and look at it later. We go ahead and export that out to the Excel sheet. Notice I hit that and it's going to open that Excel sheet. And we can get an estimated cost of what this is going to cost us in to run this workloads in Azure. Notice there's a very more of them. I didn't show that, but I added basically our whole solution so I could get a feel for it. Our initial move is just going to be 3 machines, so our cost will be less. But this gives us an idea if we want to move everything to the cloud, what it might look like cost-wise. You can see the different options there, and again, why the naming is important. That way we know what resources for what. And there's our estimated monthly cost.